Díagwyd the Corda, and welcome to Bruna Nation. From many counties around the country, we've gathered here today in memory of those that fought for our freedom in the War of Independence, and especially here today, standing at the most beautiful Sean Wall Monument. And first and foremost, I have to say, for all that have travelled from every county around Ireland, it's absolutely fantastic to see you all come together on this, what we must hold, our culture. Our culture is been crumbling, like this statue is crumbling behind us. We cannot allow our culture to crumble in this our era. So on the 101st anniversary of the death of Sean Wall and all the East Limerick Brigade that gave their lives for the freedom that we have enjoyed through our lifetime, but we feel that that is threatened once again. So first and foremost, we have 5 speakers today, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. So I'm going to ask Michael Leahy to take to the mic, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. My name is Michael Leahy. I'm the chairman of the Irish Freedom Party. Agus is more on an or dumsa in you live con cmore yen of igwivne Sean the Wall, public panok, side your lechwer. Agus far no. Did I lock part Olvors and Rave Load, Agus far arena Hebert sail fain, or son the Sirsha, Agus or son the Hen. It's a great honour for me to be able to speak to commemorate the life of Sean Wall, a native of Bruff and a proud Limerick man, who made the ultimate sacrifice to establish Ireland's nationhood and to secure our freedom. There are many people alive today who would rather that we forget how this country's freedoms were established. Those freedoms had to be fought for by the sacrifice, determination and grit of brave men and women like Sean Wall. It's a sad commentary that we'd had no commemoration during his 100th anniversary, but at least we can now hope to set that to right. Sean Wall was not just a patriot and a soldier in the military sense, he was also a practical patriot. He was a man of business, both in building construction and manufacturing. He was a political activist, and he had culture, being involved in the League, and he was recognised as a superb organiser and was one of the first leaders to give sanction to the formation of the flying columns, which were so effective during the War of Independence. At the time of his death, he was the chairman of Limerick County Council, and there can be little doubt that had he lived, he would have made an immense contribution to the development of the Irish Republic. Unfortunately, in recent years, the value of his sacrifice, and indeed the value of nationhood, has been called into question by many of our political establishments. The value of a home for the Irish people has even been called into question. Recently at this monument we saw the replacement of the Irish tricolour by the flag of the Ukraine. While I have every sympathy for the present plight of the Ukrainian people, we must never forget that our primary loyalty is to the maintenance of an independent and free Irish Republic as a homeland for the Irish people. We owe it to the memory of men like Sean Wall never to forget that. It is the primary function of government and of a state to provide for the stability of its own nation. But the levels of emigration now being generated into Ireland under the guise of a response to the war in Europe threaten the stability of this nation. In the middle of a housing crisis, the idea that we can allow mass migration into this country without any limit is one which places the stability of this country at grave risk. The use of emergency legislation in the current situation begs the question as to why the same urgency was not shown in solving the current housing crisis, or indeed the other crises which we face. I've said many times before, you can either have a social welfare system or you can have an open door immigration policy, but you cannot have both. There are those who believe that the concept of a sovereign independent nation state is over. In the words of our Taoiseach, that it is an outdated idea. I beg to differ. In the final analysis, it is the unity of a people which can only be provided by a sense of nationhood, which enables the people to prosper and to thrive. If Ireland ever loses that sense of its nationhood and its history, it will be a sad betrayal of those who sacrificed so much to establish them. I, for one, have no intention of ever letting that happen. I believe that the idea of the destruction of nationhood is promoted in order to strip the assets of the people and in order to transfer wealth to the super wealthy. How often have we heard recently that we will soon own nothing and we will be happy? Somehow, the requirement to own nothing will never apply to the super wealthy. It will never apply to politicians, but it is applied to the ordinary people. As we speak, the government is proposing a referendum which will strip away our property rights. And it seems that it will use the present crisis in Eastern Europe as a justification for doing this. As they used the COVID emergency to attack personal freedoms, so they will use a bogus immigration crisis to attack the very basics of private property. They have already attacked the nature of the human family. They have even gone into undermining what it is to be a man or a woman. Those who seek to govern in this way seek only the destruction of the Irish people and of the Irish nation. It is time to us to say to government that enough is enough. We are proud of our nation, of our history and of our culture, and we will not let them be destroyed. The governments of the West and the Irish government is now going where the Bolsheviks of Soviet Russia went in the 1920s. The Soviets at that time created a level of suffering for their people which was unprecedented in history. I pray to God that we will not repeat the same mistakes, but when I look at the sheer stupidity of the actions taken by the European Union in the present crisis, it gives cause for alarm. The sanctions regime which has been proposed as part of the present response to the war will do nothing to damage Russia, but will destroy the industrial economy of Europe and impoverish its citizens in a way which this generation can scarcely imagine. I'm not just talking about fuel poverty, I'm talking about food shortages, runaway inflation, the destruction of savings and the destruction of pension funds. If you don't believe me, it is of note that the German and the Swiss government recently warned their people to prepare for food shortages and to stockpile resources. In fact, I believe that the sanctions regime has nothing to do with the war, but is in pursuit of the crackpot global warming ideology so beloved of our politicians. It is the rural parts of the country which will suffer the most and the most immediately from these policies. The banning of turf and the imposition of carbon taxes at a time of a huge spike in oil prices. These are policies which will hurt rural people and damage the agricultural economy. They are unnecessary and are not supported by science. At the same time as the government is preparing legislation to attack the most basic rights of property and home ownership, they are also on the point of completing an extremist attack against freedom of speech and freedom of expression. If you do not believe what I say, I suggest you read the proposed hate speech legislation, which has almost unanimous support of all parties in the Dáil, with the exception of those rural independent CDs, including Richard Donoghue from this constituency, who must be acknowledged. We must let government know that any state which prohibits free speech is not a legitimate form of government, and taking the example of patriots like Sean Wall, we must tell them we will not stand for it. The government knows that the people are uneasy, that the people are beginning to wake up to what is happening, and they want to ensure that you will not have the right to speak in a public forum, because in the end of the day they are terrified of the people, and the only thing they can do is use coercion to prevent any expression of public dissent. We now face a level of threat to our democracy that our nation has not faced since independence. When we look at the propaganda that is being used in our state media, in our schools, and has even extended into our churches, it is perhaps time for us to go back to the period of 1916 to 22 and learn from the patriotism and the idealism of people like Sean Wall, who did so much to establish this country. I believe that those patriots would be very disturbed by what they would see at this moment. Mr. Wall understood the importance of business in the creation of wealth and in the development of resources. I believe he would have fought against the overconcentration of wealth in the hands of the few and against the stifling of private initiative by the dead hand of the state and the European Union. He understood the importance of culture to a nation. I believe he would have been outraged at the idea of their own homeland. I believe he would have been appalled distinct to express an opinion which is not approved by higher authority. That is no way for Irish men and Irish women, not the nation that Sean Wall fought for and gave his life to establish. Invest sheer buick of Shincha Kroga or Hall of Vunigan Tier of some Noshun Shaw. Of Snigadium Quivnu, nor og she de fain Tiron, nor fain Traw, or Sear she don't dare shake. In conclusion, I wish to say that we have a proud tradition in this country of great patriots. Sean Wall was one of them. We should never forget the legacy these people have given us. There may be difficult days ahead for us, but we in Ireland have a great advantage that we can draw on the resource of our own history and of the patriotic people who gave their blood to fertilise the garden of Irish liberty. It is up to us to ensure that their hopes and their dreams will never die and that our liberty will never be extinguished. Thank you very much. I would now like to call on Melissa O'Neill to lay a wreath in commemoration of Sean Wall.